On the edge of the sprawling Mojave Desert, traffic along Highway 15 was moving at a sluggish pace. Not because of an accident, but because of a small, unexpected roadblock. A young coyote, its fur tinged with the golden light of the setting sun, had ventured too close to the highway and seemed to be frozen in place. As if unsure of its next move, drivers honked in frustration, but the coyote, unperturbed, stood its ground. Officer Olivia Harper, 32, had seen her fair share of odd wildlife encounters during her 8 years with the California Highway Patrol. But this was something new. As she approached the scene, she could tell this wasn't your typical animal encounter. The coyote was skittish, but there was something about its eyes, wide, alert, yet with a strange calmness. It wasn't just trying to cross the road, it was trying to communicate. Olivia parked her patrol car, flipped on her siren, and stepped out into the heat of the desert afternoon. The sun was unforgiving, beating down on the cracked pavement. But she had a job to do. As she approached the coyote, her hand instinctively went to the radio, requesting backup from animal control. "Ma'am, it looks like the coyote is trying to get through," one of the drivers shouted as he stepped out of his car. He pointed at the animal. "I've been watching it for a while, and it seems like it wants something." Olivia nodded, squinting as she took a closer look. The coyote was smaller than most she had seen in the desert. Its fur was still a little too soft, like it hadn't fully transitioned from pup to adult. As she took a few steps closer, the animal didn't move, but its eyes never left hers. That's when she noticed the small tracker attached to its collar, a beacon. She took another step forward, crouching slightly to avoid spooking it. "Hey there, little guy," she said, her voice gentle but firm. "What are you doing out here?" The coyote remained still, its ears twitching at the sound of her voice. Olivia's heart raced with a sense of urgency she couldn't explain. She was trained to handle all sorts of situations, but a wild animal with a tracker wasn't something she could handle alone. Just then, a voice came through her radio. "Officer Harper, animal control is en route. What's the status?" "It's wearing a tracking collar," Olivia replied, not taking her eyes off the coyote. "I'm going to try to get closer. It might be trying to lead us somewhere." She stood up and slowly made her way forward, her eyes never leaving the coyote. The creature's tail flicked nervously, but it didn't retreat. Then, in the distance, she spotted something that made her pause, a cloud of dust rising from the desert floor. The coyote turned and began moving toward it, glancing over its shoulder as if it was sure someone would follow. "Is this the right move?" Olivia thought as she reached for her radio again. "I'm following the coyote. It seems like it's trying to tell us something." Her instincts told her to follow. So she did. She called for backup from the nearest search and rescue unit and began walking behind the coyote, who led her off the main highway and into the desert landscape. The sun was beginning to dip below the horizon, casting long shadows across the rugged terrain. As Olivia ventured deeper into the desert with the coyote leading the way, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was walking into something far bigger than she could have imagined. As the sun dipped lower, painting the desert sky in vibrant hues of orange and purple, Olivia kept pace behind the coyote. Its movements were slow and deliberate, each step measured as if it knew exactly where it was going. The desert stretched out before her, vast, barren, yet full of hidden life. Olivia had never ventured this far off the beaten path before, and with each step, she felt a sense of both excitement and unease. The coyote led her deeper into the heart of the Mojave, weaving through the dry brush and scattered rocks with ease. Olivia had been on countless patrols in the desert, but this felt different. The wind had picked up, and the dust swirled in the air, making the surroundings feel even more mysterious. Her radio crackled again, breaking the silence. "Olivia, do you copy?" came a voice through the static. It was her partner, Officer Jake Ramirez. "I copy," she replied, trying to keep her voice steady. "I'm following the coyote. It's leading me somewhere. I think it might be trying to show me something." "Isn't that a little unusual?" Jake's voice was skeptical. "Coyotes don't exactly do that. You sure you're not chasing something wild?" "I don't know, Jake," Olivia said, glancing at the coyote, who was now looking back at her, its eyes gleaming in the fading light. "I've never seen anything like this before, but I have a feeling we're heading in the right direction." She couldn't explain it, but she felt a connection, a pull, as though the animal was guiding her towards something important. Her training told her to stay alert, but a part of her instinctively trusted the creature. They walked for another half-hour. The only sound the crunch of gravel beneath their boots and the occasional call of distant birds. Just when Olivia was beginning to wonder if they were walking in circles, the coyote suddenly stopped. Olivia froze, her heart pounding in her chest as the coyote turned to face her and then darted off to the side, disappearing into the shadows of a cluster of jagged rocks. Olivia hesitated for a moment before following. She was now far from the road and deep into the rugged wilderness. But something about this felt like a turning point. She carefully made her way through the rocks, her flashlight cutting through the encroaching darkness. As she rounded a corner, she saw something that made her stop dead in her tracks, a small, dilapidated shack, almost completely obscured by overgrown vines and desert vegetation. It wasn't much, but it was out of place in the desolate expanse of the Mojave. Olivia's instincts screamed at her to proceed with caution, but she couldn't turn back now. The coyote had led her here for a reason. She approached the shack carefully, listening intently for any signs of life. The air was still, and for a moment, Olivia wondered if the place had been abandoned for years. Her eyes scanned the area, and that's when she saw it, something glinting from inside the shack's broken window. The coyote reappeared, its eyes glowing in the darkness as it padded toward the shack and stopped just outside. It turned and looked back at Olivia. "Waiting. Okay, I'm coming," she whispered to herself. She had no idea what awaited her inside, but she couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning of something much bigger than a simple wildlife rescue. Stepping into the dim light of the shack, Olivia felt a strange chill run down her spine. The air inside was heavy with dust and neglect. As her flashlight swept over the interior, she saw remnants of old furniture and abandoned belongings. But what caught her eye was a large, weathered box in the corner, half hidden behind a stack of old crates. She walked toward it cautiously, her pulse quickening. Something told her that whatever this was, it was connected to the tracker on the coyote's collar. As she reached the box, her flashlight illuminated a faded label on its side, one that sent a shiver down her spine. "Evidence," it read. Her hand hesitated over the box for a moment before she opened it. Inside, she found stacks of old files, papers, and a series of maps. They were covered in strange markings, symbols that she didn't immediately recognize. But one map stood out, an old, torn map of the Mojave Desert, with several locations marked in red. Olivia's mind raced. This wasn't just an abandoned shack, it was a hidden storage site. And whatever was in these files was far more than a simple animal rescue. The coyote stood at the doorway, watching her intently. For a moment, Olivia felt like she had uncovered something that had been waiting for years to be discovered. But there was still so much more to learn. Who had left these files here? And what did they mean? Before she could dig any deeper, her radio crackled again. "Olivia, we're approaching your location. We've got some movement in the area. You okay?" "I'm fine," Olivia replied, still staring at the map. "But I think we've found something important." The air inside the shack felt dense as Olivia sifted through the files. Each document seemed to tell a story of the desert that she had never heard before. Cryptic notes and coded messages that spoke of lost hikers, strange animal behaviors, and hidden campsites. Some of the documents appeared old, their edges frayed and yellowed with age, while others seemed fresh, as though they had been placed there only days ago. Her mind raced as she tried to piece everything together. The markings on the map were clearly significant. But why were they marked in red? What was the connection between the coyote, the map, and the strange files? The deeper she dug, the more questions she had. Her radio crackled again, snapping her out of her thoughts. "Olivia, we're getting close. Stay put. We'll be there soon." Jake's voice came through, his tone urgent. "I found something," Olivia replied, her voice steady despite the whirlwind of thoughts racing in her head. "I think there's something bigger going on here than just a rescue. I need backup." "We're on our way," Jake said, and the radio clicked off. Olivia continued to examine the contents of the box, her fingers tracing over the papers. But one document in particular caught her attention, a small photograph tucked into a corner of the file. It showed a man standing beside a coyote, both of them looking straight at the camera. The man was older, his weathered face partially hidden beneath a wide-brimmed hat. His eyes were intense, and there was a strange connection between him and the animal. Something almost unnatural. Olivia felt a chill run down her spine. Could this man be connected to the strange occurrences in the Mojave? Was he the one behind whatever mysterious operation was taking place out here? She flipped the photograph over. And there, written in faint ink, was a name, Jacob West. The name didn't ring any bells. But Olivia knew she had to find out more. Before she could delve deeper, she heard footsteps outside the shack. She froze, listening. It was too soon for Jake and the team. Cautiously, she slipped the photograph into her jacket pocket and stood up, gripping her flashlight tightly. The coyote, still standing in the doorway, turned and darted into the shadows, vanishing into the night. Olivia's heart pounded as the footsteps grew louder, and she ducked down behind an old crate, trying to remain unseen. The door creaked open, and she held her breath. Through the crack, she saw a shadowy figure slip inside, moving with practiced stealth. The figure was tall, dressed in dark clothes that blended into the night, and they carried a large duffel bag. Whoever this was, they weren't here by accident. The figure moved toward the box she had been searching through and stopped dead in their tracks. Olivia could see the tension in their posture. It was as if they had expected the box to be there but hadn't counted on someone else already being here. "What do we have here?" the figure muttered to themselves, their voice low and gravelly. Olivia's pulse quickened. She needed to act fast. Quietly, she reached for her radio. But just as she was about to speak, the figure turned and stepped toward her hiding place. She froze, praying that they hadn't noticed her. The figure paused, sniffing the air, like a predator sensing its prey. Olivia held her breath, barely daring to move. The coyote's sudden howl in the distance sent a chill through the air. And the figure turned toward the sound. Distracted, this was her chance. Without making a sound, Olivia moved swiftly to the side of the shack, slipping out the back door into the brush. Her heart racing. She didn't know who the figure was or what they were after. But she was certain that they were involved in whatever strange network was operating in the Mojave. She could hear the figure moving inside the shack, rummaging through the box. But Olivia wasn't about to wait around. The only thing she knew for sure was that the answers she was searching for lay somewhere beyond this place. As she made her way through the desert, her thoughts raced. She needed to get back to the main road, find Jake, and report what she had uncovered. But the more she thought about it, the more the photograph with the name, Jacob West, haunted her. She had to find out who he was and why his name was linked to everything happening here. By the time Olivia reached her patrol car, her mind was made up. This wasn't just a random encounter with a coyote. This was something much bigger. And she wasn't about to let it slip away. With a deep breath, she keyed her radio. "Jake, I need you to look up a name for me, Jacob West." There was a pause on the other end. And then Jake's voice returned, this time with a hint of concern. "Olivia, what's going on? I think we've stumbled into something far worse than we realized. I need your help." The next morning, Olivia met Jake near the entrance of the Mojave Desert. The sun was just beginning to rise, casting long shadows over the rocky landscape. The heat from the previous day had cooled, but the air still felt heavy with the weight of secrets. They had both spent hours trying to find more information about Jacob West. But so far, nothing had come up. It was as if he had disappeared from the world, leaving no trace behind. Olivia couldn't shake the feeling that they were getting closer to something big. Something important. The more she thought about Jacob West, the more she wondered if the man in the photograph was the key to understanding everything. "Jake," Olivia said as she looked up from the map they had been studying. "I have a feeling we're not just looking for a missing hiker or wild animal. There's something much bigger going on here. Jacob West, the man in the photograph, I think he's involved in all of this somehow." Jake nodded, looking thoughtful. "I agree, but what exactly is he doing here? And why has he disappeared without a trace?" Olivia stared at the photograph of Jacob West again, her mind racing. The more she looked at his intense eyes, the more she felt like she was being watched. It was as though he was still out there, somewhere, waiting for her to uncover the truth. Just then, Olivia's radio crackled. It was one of her fellow officers, reporting from a nearby roadblock. "Olivia, we found something. You need to come here. Now." Olivia's heart skipped a beat. She exchanged a look with Jake. "This is it," she said, her voice full of determination. "Let's go." They quickly climbed into their patrol car and drove toward the roadblock, their minds racing with possibilities. As they approached, Olivia saw a small group of officers standing around a truck, and one of them waved them over. "We found a box," the officer explained. "It was hidden behind some rocks, just off the main road. It's marked with the same symbol we saw on the documents you brought in. We thought you should take a look." Olivia's heart pounded in her chest as she walked over to the box. It was old, covered in dirt and dust, but the symbol on it was unmistakable. The same strange symbol she had seen on the map. The same one linked to Jacob West. She felt like they were finally on the right track. As she opened the box, she found a set of files inside. These were not like the ones from the shack. These were carefully organized, with names and dates written clearly on each document. Olivia scanned the top file and froze. It was a list of people who had disappeared in the Mojave Desert over the years. Some of them hikers, others just travelers passing through. But what caught her attention was one name at the bottom of the list: Jacob West. This was it. Olivia had found the missing piece of the puzzle. "Jake, look at this," Olivia said, her voice a little shaky. "Jacob West is connected to all of these disappearances. And it looks like he's been operating in this desert for years." Jake stepped closer, scanning the list. "But why? What was he doing out here?" "I don't know yet," Olivia replied, "but we need to find out. This is much bigger than we thought." They quickly packed up the files and drove back to the main road. Olivia's mind raced as she thought about all the strange events that had led them to this point: the coyote, the mysterious box, the photograph, and now this list. Everything was connected, and Jacob West was at the center of it all. But where was he now? What had happened to him? And what was his ultimate goal? As the sun rose higher in the sky, Olivia knew they were getting closer to uncovering the truth. She just hoped they weren't too late. As the afternoon heat began to creep back into the Mojave Desert, Olivia and Jake followed the trail that the mysterious box had suggested. The desert was a vast and unforgiving place, its endless stretches of sand and rock seeming to blur into one another. But they had a purpose now, a clear goal. The list of names had led them to a remote area of the desert where strange occurrences had been reported for decades. Local legends spoke of a hidden compound in the desert where people vanished, never to be seen again. Olivia and Jake couldn't ignore the possibility that this might be where Jacob West had been. They drove for miles, the landscape slowly changing from the rocky outcrops to more barren stretches of land. The air was thick with dust, and the scent of sagebrush filled their nostrils. Despite the harsh conditions, Olivia couldn't shake the feeling that they were getting closer to something monumental. "You ever get the feeling we're being watched?" Jake asked, breaking the silence. Olivia looked around, her instincts kicking in. The desert was still, too still. "Yeah, I've felt it since we opened that box. Like someone's been following us, watching our every move." Jake nodded, his hand resting on the steering wheel. "I don't like it, but if we're going to find Jacob West, or whatever is out here, we need to press on." As they neared their destination, Olivia noticed something unusual in the distance, a structure partially hidden among the rocks. It wasn't much to look at from afar, but as they got closer, she could make out the shape of a small building, camouflaged by the surrounding terrain. "We're getting close," Olivia murmured. She could feel her heart racing. Jake slowed the car and pulled off the road. They got out and started walking toward the building, the desert heat pressing down on them with each step. The structure was small, but it seemed out of place in the middle of nowhere. It looked like a makeshift shelter, with walls made of rocks and wood, and the faintest hint of smoke rising from a chimney. "I've got a bad feeling about this," Jake said, his voice low. Olivia nodded, her hand instinctively resting on the grip of her gun. As they approached the entrance, they paused. Something wasn't right. There were no signs of life, but the air around the building felt charged, as though something, or someone, was waiting. "Stay close," Olivia whispered. They stepped forward cautiously, pushing open the creaking door. Inside, the air was thick with dust, and the dim light made it hard to see. The walls were lined with shelves, each filled with papers and old books. But it wasn't the contents that caught Olivia's attention. It was the photograph on the wall. There, in the center of the room, was a picture of Jacob West. But that wasn't the only surprise. Below the photograph, written in bold letters, was a message: "The desert never forgets. And neither do we." A chill ran down Olivia's spine. This was no ordinary desert hideout. It was a place where people, like Jacob West, had come to disappear, and where they might never leave. "I don't like this, Olivia," Jake muttered, his eyes scanning the room. Olivia's instincts were screaming at her to leave, but something kept her rooted to the spot. She felt as though she was on the verge of discovering something monumental. Something that would change everything they thought they knew about this desert. The photograph of Jacob West seemed to taunt her, its cold eyes staring back at her from the wall. "I think we've found what we're looking for," Olivia said, her voice barely a whisper. Jake turned to her, his face tense. "What do we do now?" Olivia took a deep breath. Steadying herself, "We find out what Jacob West was involved in, and we make sure the desert's secrets don't stay buried for much longer." As the sun began to set, casting long shadows over the desolate desert, Olivia and Jake knew they were on the brink of uncovering something significant. The photograph of Jacob West, still hauntingly present in the dusty room, was more than just a reminder of a missing person. It was a clue, a connection to something deeper hidden in the vast emptiness of the Mojave Desert. Olivia stood still for a moment, gazing at the photograph. The inscription beneath it seemed to mock her, as if the desert itself was daring her to uncover its secrets. "Let's explore the place," Olivia said quietly, breaking the silence. "There has to be something here." Jake nodded reluctantly, his hand still resting on the gun holster. They began to sift through the papers scattered on the shelves, trying to make sense of the jumble of old records, maps, and strange symbols written on scraps of yellowed paper. Some of it was clearly outdated, but one thing became apparent as they turned each page. Jacob West wasn't the only one whose name appeared repeatedly. There were others, dozens of names, and all of them had vanished, just like Jacob. Olivia's heart began to race as she traced her fingers across a map pinned to the wall. It showed the desert surrounding them, but there were markings, symbols, almost like coordinates, scattered across it. One set of coordinates stood out. It was marked with a circle and a small X. "This could be it," Olivia murmured, her voice filled with determination. "This might be where they took him, or where he went." Jake leaned in, his gaze narrowing. "But why leave all this behind? If Jacob was part of something, why would they let us find this?" Olivia's mind raced. There were too many unanswered questions, too many connections that didn't add up. But she had a feeling, a gut instinct telling her that the answers lay beyond the coordinates on the map. "Because they want us to find it," Olivia replied, more to herself than to Jake. "They want us to dig deeper, to uncover something." She turned to Jake, her eyes steely with resolve. "We need to go there. Now." Jake didn't hesitate. He understood the weight of the decision. "Let's go," he said, already heading for the door. "If we're doing this, we do it together." They made their way back to the car, the setting sun casting a reddish glow over the vast expanse of the desert. As they drove, Olivia's mind wandered back to the many mysteries of the desert. It had been a place of danger and uncertainty, but it had also been a place of unexpected revelation. If Jacob West had truly disappeared here, if there was a secret hidden beneath its sand and rock, Olivia was determined to uncover it. And so, as they drove toward the coordinates marked on the map, they knew they were not just searching for a missing person. They were searching for the truth. The ride through the desert felt endless, the road stretching out before them in an endless ribbon of dust and gravel. Olivia's hands gripped the steering wheel tightly, eyes scanning the horizon for any sign of the landmark from the map. Jake sat in silence beside her, his brow furrowed in thought. They had been driving for almost 2 hours when the terrain began to change. The flat, barren landscape started to give way to jagged rock formations, the kind that seemed to hide secrets in their shadows. Olivia slowed the car as she spotted a faint trail leading off the main road. Winding through the rocks, the map's coordinates were close now. "Here," Olivia muttered, pulling the car off the road. They climbed out, the heat still lingering in the air despite the setting sun. The rocky path in front of them was steep, but they pressed on, navigating the rough terrain. After a few minutes, Olivia stopped, her heart racing. Ahead of them, hidden behind a cluster of rocks, was a narrow opening in the ground. A cave, barely visible in the fading light, but unmistakable. "This is it," Olivia whispered. Jake stepped forward, his expression a mix of skepticism and curiosity. "You sure?" Olivia nodded. "The map led us here." They both knelt at the entrance, staring into the darkness. Olivia took a deep breath. "We go in together." With that, they stepped into the cave. The air cool and damp compared to the scorching desert outside. Their footsteps echoed in the silence as they made their way deeper, using their flashlights to pierce through the darkness. The deeper they went, the more the cave seemed to open up. Eventually, they found themselves standing in a large chamber, its walls covered in strange symbols and drawings, similar to the ones they had seen in the old papers back at the cabin. But this time, there was something new. A large stone slab, carved with more intricate symbols, sat in the center of the room. Olivia approached the slab, her hand trembling as she traced the carvings. "This is it. This is where it all started." Jake stepped beside her, his voice low. "But what does it mean?" Before Olivia could answer, there was a faint sound, something stirring in the darkness behind them. Both of them froze, their hearts racing. "Did you hear that?" Jake asked, his voice barely a whisper. Olivia nodded. "Stay close." They slowly turned, their flashlights scanning the shadows. And then, out of the darkness, they saw it, a figure, cloaked in the shadows, moving silently toward them. Olivia and Jake stood frozen, staring into the shadows. The figure slowly emerged from the darkness, its movements smooth and deliberate, like someone who had been waiting for them. "Who are you?" Olivia called out, her voice steady despite the fear rising in her chest. The figure stepped forward, revealing a tall man dressed in weathered clothes, his face hidden behind a hood. He didn't answer right away, instead studying them intently. Jake instinctively took a step closer to Olivia, but the man held up a hand, signaling for them to stop. "I know why you're here," the man said, his voice low but clear. "You're searching for something that doesn't belong to you." Olivia's heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean?" The man took a step closer, and the faint light from their flashlights revealed a small symbol on his arm, one that matched the ones on the cave walls. "You've been following the map, haven't you?" he asked, his eyes narrowing. "But there's more to this place than you think. It was never meant for outsiders." Jake took a deep breath, his voice tight with suspicion. "What are you trying to say? Are you guarding this place?" The man nodded slowly. "I've been guarding it for years. And now you've come, digging up things that should remain hidden. The secrets of this place are dangerous." Olivia stepped forward, her curiosity overcoming her wariness. "We just want to understand. What is this place? And why are the symbols here so important?" The man sighed, his shoulders heavy with years of burden. "This cave, it holds something ancient. Something that, if disturbed, could change everything. The map you've been following? It's not meant for just anyone to find. But now, it's too late. You're already here." A chill ran down Olivia's spine as she realized the gravity of what he was saying. They had been searching for answers, but what they had uncovered might be more than they could handle. "We didn't mean to," Olivia whispered. The man gave a grim smile. "No one ever does." Olivia felt a rush of adrenaline mixed with confusion. Her mind raced, trying to piece everything together. The map, the cave, the symbols, and now this man. But what did it all have to do with the wolf? "You mentioned danger," Jake said, his voice growing more intense. "But why does it matter? What's the wolf got to do with all this?" The man's expression shifted slightly, as if the mention of the wolf had struck a chord. He took a slow step back, and the air seemed to grow heavier around them. "You really don't know, do you?" he murmured, his gaze drifting toward the shadows. "The wolf you saw, it's not just any wolf. It's part of something much bigger. A guardian, of sorts. But it's also tied to the secrets of this place." Olivia's heart skipped a beat. A guardian? Could the wolf be more than just a wild animal? Could it have been watching them for a reason? Jake stepped forward, determination in his eyes. "Why? Why would a wolf be tied to this? We just need answers. All of this is too much." The man's eyes darkened, and for a brief moment, Olivia thought she saw something akin to fear in his expression. He nodded slowly, as if deciding whether to trust them. "The wolf is connected to an ancient legend," the man said, his voice now quiet but filled with urgency. "It is said that only a true descendant of the forest, the guardian, can unlock the cave's secrets. And those who are not worthy, they face the consequences. The wolf knows who is worthy. It doesn't show itself to just anyone." Jake looked confused. "You're saying the wolf is watching us? Like some kind of test?" "Yes," the man answered, "and if it has led you here, it means something. The wolf is not just a guide. It is a warning. It's protecting the balance. And you've already crossed a line. Olivia felt a chill creep up her spine. This was no longer just about a map or a mysterious cave. There was something much deeper at play. And somehow, the wolf, the cave, and the man were all connected. She swallowed hard, trying to steady her breath. What happens if we don't leave? If we push forward? The man looked at her. His face grim. The cave will give you answers. But at a price. It's not just an ancient secret waiting to be discovered. It's a force, something that could either guide you or destroy you. Depending on what you choose. Jake clenched his fists. Frustration building. We can't just walk away. We have to know. We came this far. The man's eyes softened for a moment. A brief flicker of understanding passing between them. I'm not saying you shouldn't seek the truth. But be careful what you wish for. The wolf doesn't show itself to those who aren't ready. As if on cue, a soft howling sound echoed through the trees. It was distant but clear, sending a shiver through Olivia's body. She turned toward the sound, her heart racing. It's here, she whispered. The man nodded, his voice barely audible. It's waiting, but the question is, are you ready to face what it guards? Olivia and Jake carefully examined the stone door, their hearts pounding with anticipation. Olivia, recalling the small metal key they had discovered earlier in the hidden compartment of the glowing stone, stepped forward. The key felt cold in her hand, its intricate design matching the patterns they had seen on the stone walls. This is it, she whispered, inserting the key into a small lock near the doorframe. The lock clicked, and with a soft groan, the heavy stone door began to slowly open. A cold draft rushed past them as the door creaked to a halt, revealing a large, dimly lit chamber. Inside, rows of people lay on stone slabs, their bodies unmoving. Olivia's breath caught in her throat as she recognized several faces. These were the missing people they had been searching for. They're here, she murmured, walking toward the closest person. A young woman whose face appeared pale but peaceful. They're alive, but they don't seem to be conscious. Jake crouched beside another person, a man in his 40s, and checked for a pulse. They're all breathing, he confirmed, looking up at Olivia, but they're in some kind of deep sleep, or paralysis. Olivia felt a pang of helplessness. We can't move them, we don't know what's been done to them, and we don't have the means to help them here. The weight of the situation settled heavily on both of them. The discovery of the missing people felt like a victory. But without proper medical equipment and support, they could do nothing to help them in this moment. After a few moments of silence, Olivia made a decision. We need to report this. We can't do anything for them here, but we can get the proper authorities involved. Jake nodded, his expression grim. I agree. We need to get back and tell them what we found. Reluctantly, they turned and retraced their steps, exiting the chamber and heading back through the cave. The path felt longer now, as if the weight of the discovery had slowed their progress. As they emerged into the dim light of the forest, they both knew the real work was only just beginning. Just as Olivia and Jake were about to get into the vehicle to head back to headquarters and report, a figure suddenly appeared from the darkness of the forest. The man they had encountered earlier in the cave emerged from the dense trees, his face full of fear, holding a small syringe. Olivia's heart raced as she realized his intent. He was about to attack them with the tranquilizer. Step back, Olivia yelled, trying to pull Jake away. But it was too late. A hiss filled the air, and both Olivia and Jake felt the dizziness take over. The tranquilizer began to take effect. Olivia's body felt heavy, and her vision blurred. Jake staggered, trying to stay upright, but before they could completely collapse, a surge of adrenaline pushed them into their final reflex. They both rushed toward the man, Olivia grabbing his arm while Jake used all his strength to wrest the syringe from his hand. But due to the effects of the tranquilizer, both of them felt weak and disoriented. They couldn't keep up their strength for long. The three of them tumbled to the ground, and Olivia knew they had to act quickly before they lost control completely. Keep him there, Olivia whispered. Jake, in a daze, quickly pulled the man against a large tree, restraining him and tying his hands with the rope they had brought. There was no time left. Olivia shakily pulled out her phone, her hands trembling, and quickly dialed her superior. We've been attacked. Need urgent assistance. Location. She couldn't say more before the tranquilizer took full effect. She collapsed to the ground, her eyes closing. When Olivia woke up, she found herself lying in a hospital bed, The warm light and soft whispers of voices around her. Both Jake and the man who had attacked them were nowhere to be seen. But Olivia knew for sure that she and Jake had been rescued. The man was now in custody and under investigation. Their work, once again, was just beginning. Olivia sat up slowly, still feeling the weight of what had happened. As soon as she felt steady, she requested to speak with her superior. A few minutes later, her boss entered the room. "Olivia, you're awake. How are you feeling?" he asked. His voice filled with concern. "I'm fine," she replied, her voice steady but determined. "But I need to tell you everything that happened." She explained everything in detail. How they had followed the mysterious clues, found the hidden room, and discovered the missing people. She described the man who had attacked them and how they had managed to restrain him long enough to call for help. "I'm afraid we don't have enough resources on site to help the victims," Olivia said, her voice full of concern. "But I know exactly where they are. And we need to act quickly before anything else happens." Her superior nodded gravely. "We'll gather a team and head there immediately." Olivia and her superior put together a small, specialized team, and with determination in their eyes, they headed back to the cave. The plan was to rescue the victims and gather all the evidence they could to put an end to whatever dark operation was going on beneath the surface. The team, equipped with medical supplies, ropes, and other necessary tools, made their way back to the cave. The air was thick with tension as they navigated through the dark corridors, the sound of their footsteps echoing off the walls. Olivia led the way, her determination sharp. She knew the path by heart, having been there before, and the urgency of the situation pushed her forward. When they arrived at the entrance to the hidden room, the team immediately went into action. 2 medics began setting up a temporary triage station while others moved to secure the area. Olivia pointed to the sleeping victims, her voice steady but filled with urgency. "We need to carefully move them," Olivia instructed. "They've been in a deep, unconscious state for too long. If we don't get them medical help now, it could be too late." The medics nodded, gently lifting the victims one by one and bringing them out of the room. As the last person was taken outside, Olivia couldn't help but feel a weight lift from her chest. They were going to be okay. They were going to make it out alive. Just as the last person was loaded into the rescue vehicle, Olivia noticed something. The man who had attacked her and Jake earlier wasn't with them. Her heart skipped a beat. "Where's the suspect?" Olivia asked, turning to her superior. "We've secured him in a holding area. He'll be questioned as soon as we get back," her superior replied. Olivia took a deep breath, feeling a mix of relief and resolve. They had done what they came for. But the real work was just beginning. The man they had captured had answers, and Olivia knew they would need them to uncover the full scope of the operation. As the rescue team left the cave and made their way back to safety, Olivia couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. The answers they were about to uncover would lead them down a darker path. But it was a path she was ready to follow. As Olivia studied the photograph, she felt her heart skip a beat. The man in the picture, standing next to the large wolf, was not just a familiar face from the investigation. He was now lying unconscious in one of the hospital beds. The realization hit her hard. This was one of the missing people they had been desperately searching for. Her breath caught in her throat as she approached his bed. The man's features were faintly recognizable despite his pale complexion and the dirt on his clothes, a sign of his time spent in captivity. But what stood out was the absence of the wolf. The animal, who had been so determined to lead them to him, was nowhere to be seen. "Jake, come look at this," Olivia said urgently, motioning toward the man on the bed. "This is him, the one from the photo. He's one of the missing victims." Jake walked over, his brow furrowing. "So, he's the one, but where's the wolf?" Olivia paused for a moment, still processing the connection. The wolf had guided them here, wanting to save its owner. Now, with the man found and the wolf gone, it left Olivia with a sense of emptiness. The bond between them was clear, and it made her even more determined to figure out exactly what had happened. "Let's make sure he gets the help he needs," Olivia said quietly, looking back at Jake. "We'll get to the bottom of this. The wolf didn't lead us here for nothing." After the man who had been guarding the cave was taken into custody, Olivia and Jake sat down with him in the interrogation room. The man seemed visibly distressed, shifting uncomfortably in his chair. Olivia knew this was her only chance to get some answers. and she was determined to find out the truth. "Why did you do it?" Olivia asked, her tone firm but controlled. "Who gave you the orders to keep those people locked up in that cave? What was going on there?" The man hesitated, his eyes darting around the room before he spoke in a low voice. "I didn't have a choice," he said. "They threatened me, said if I didn't cooperate, they'd make sure I disappear. They were conducting experiments involving a drug that made people forget everything. They wanted to see if it could erase memories completely." Jake's brow furrowed. "Who were these people? Who was behind it?" The man shook his head, looking defeated. "I don't know their names. All I know is they were working under the orders of someone higher up, a government official. They were using people who'd gone missing, to test this memory-erasing drug. They told me to keep them alive, but not to let them remember anything. It was all top secret." Olivia exchanged a glance with Jake, a cold sense of realization settling over her. This was bigger than they had initially thought. The operation was being run by someone with power, someone untouchable. "Where are they now?" Olivia pressed, her voice steady despite the rising frustration. "I don't know," the man replied weakly. "They came and went, told me they'd be back, but they took all the equipment and left weeks ago. They said they were testing the drug on the people, erasing their memories, and making sure the drug worked. They promised me money and a new life. But I never saw them again." Olivia felt a knot form in her stomach. It was clear now that this was a government-sanctioned operation, one that could not be solved by them alone. "We need to report this to the higher-ups," Olivia said, her voice calm but resolute. "We can't deal with this on our own. If it's as big as it sounds, this goes far beyond what we can handle." Jake nodded in agreement. "Agreed. We'll have to pass this up to the right people. But we need to find out who's behind it and stop them before more damage is done." With the man's testimony, Olivia and Jake contacted their superiors immediately. The operation was much more than a rogue experiment, it was part of a larger, more dangerous agenda led by a high-ranking government official. They were instructed to stand down for now, as the situation was far beyond their jurisdiction. A higher-level investigation was launched. Olivia and Jake provided all the evidence they had gathered, including the man's confession and the location of the cave. But for now, it was up to the authorities to handle the next steps. Olivia sat in her office, her thoughts heavy with the knowledge that those responsible would soon face justice. But the shadows of this conspiracy still loomed over her. She couldn't help but wonder how many more secrets were hidden out there, secrets that needed to be exposed, no matter how high the stakes. In the days following the discovery, the effects of the memory-erasing drug became increasingly clear. Some of the people who had been held in the cave began to wake up. But their minds were fractured. Their memories were incomplete, disjointed, bits and pieces of their pasts seemed to surface at random. But they couldn't make sense of it all. The doctors and specialists worked tirelessly, trying to help them regain some semblance of normalcy. But the damage was evident. The drug had erased their pasts, and it seemed that not all of them would ever fully recover. A few of the subjects had a far worse fate. Some experienced severe allergic reactions to the drug, their bodies unable to cope with the foreign chemicals that had been introduced. These individuals didn't survive the ordeal. Their deaths served as a grim reminder of the risks that had been taken in the name of experimentation. Among the survivors, one man, who Olivia recognized from the photo with the wolf, remained unconscious. He had been injected with the same memory-erasing drug, but his condition was different from the others. His body was still in the process of fighting the effects of the drug. It was clear he had been injected more recently, which meant that his mind was still vulnerable to the drug's side effects. At the hospital, a team of specialists worked diligently on him. The medical staff had to act quickly to neutralize the drug in his system before further damage could occur. Olivia sat by his side, watching as doctors administered various treatments to break down the chemicals in his bloodstream. It was a delicate process, and the outcome was uncertain. His survival depended on how much damage the drug had already done and how effectively the medical team could remove it from his system. As the hours passed, the doctors reported that they had made progress. The man's vitals were stabilizing, but he remained unconscious. Olivia couldn't help but wonder what his story was. Who was he, really? Why had he been targeted? And what role had the wolf played in everything that had happened? The next morning, Olivia received an update. The man, who they had identified as Ethan, was starting to show signs of recovery. His vitals were strong, and his breathing had become more regular. The doctors were optimistic, though they cautioned that it would take time for his memory to return. If it ever did, Olivia stood by his bedside, watching him as the doctors worked. She couldn't shake the feeling that the answers to all the questions she had might be locked away in his mind. He had been through so much. And yet, somehow, he was still here. Olivia felt a strange sense of hope stir within her. They had saved him, but the story wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Ethan woke up after a few days, feeling as though he had just come out of a long, blurry dream. When he opened his eyes, the unfamiliar surroundings of the hospital hit him, and the bright light made his head spin. Olivia was sitting by his bed, watching over him as he regained consciousness. "You're awake?" Olivia spoke gently, her voice filled with concern. Ethan looked at her, his eyes still unfocused, trying to make sense of his surroundings. He raised a hand to his forehead, feeling the weight of his head and the fog in his mind. After a long moment of silence, he spoke, his voice hoarse. I remember having a friend, a wolf. But I can't remember clearly. I know it was really important to me, but everything feels so blurry." Olivia listened quietly, nodding without asking further questions. She knew his memory wasn't fully restored yet. Everything was like a broken puzzle, pieces yet to be connected. A few days later, Ethan's memories slowly returned. He recalled the details of the wolf, his lifelong companion. It wasn't just any animal, it was his closest friend, the one he had raised since childhood. They had grown up together, and it had always been by his side through tough times. The wolf was more like family than a pet. One morning, with his memory fully restored, Ethan turned to Olivia, his expression serious. "I remember now. The wolf. It's been my friend since I was a child. It's always been there for me. Like family. But after I was kidnapped and forced into that experiment, I lost track of everything. I need to see it again." Olivia looked into his eyes, understanding the worry and longing in his voice. "We'll find it. It's been with you all this time. And we'll help you." Ethan nodded, a sense of reassurance settling within him. The wolf, his lifelong friend that he had lost, was now his greatest hope. With Olivia's help, he believed he would never be alone again. Olivia knew that her mission wasn't complete yet, although Ethan's memory had returned and he had regained some sense of stability. There was still one crucial thing left to do. She needed to find the wolf, the companion Ethan had lost. With his request echoing in her mind, Olivia set off back to the desolate desert, the place where everything had begun. The dry wind swept across the barren land, and the sun hung heavy in the sky. Olivia had been to this abandoned house before, but this time, it felt different. As she stepped carefully over the sand and stone, her heart quickened with anticipation. She had to find it. The bond between Ethan and the wolf was undeniable, and she knew it was only a matter of time before they reunited. As she entered the house, there was a familiar presence in the air. She could feel the wolf's presence before she even saw it. And there it was, lying in the corner of the house, watching her approach with cautious eyes. The same golden fur, the same powerful build, it was the same wolf Ethan had described. It was waiting for her. Olivia knelt down slowly, extending her hand to the wolf. "I know you've been waiting for him," she said softly, her voice full of warmth. The wolf's eyes softened, and after a brief moment of hesitation, it stood up and approached her. She could feel the trust in its movements. Olivia led the wolf out of the house and back towards the hospital where Ethan was waiting. When they finally arrived, Ethan's eyes lit up at the sight of the wolf. He stood up shakily, a smile spreading across his face. "You found it," he whispered. The wolf bounded toward him, and Ethan crouched down, running his hands through its fur. There was a deep sense of relief in his eyes. The reunion was quiet but powerful. Ethan and the wolf, the two who had been separated for so long, were finally together again. The bond between them was unspoken, but it was clear that they would never be apart again. Olivia watched the reunion, a smile crossing her face. It had been a long journey, but it was worth it, as the wolf and its owner shared a moment of silent understanding. Olivia felt a sense of peace. The story had come to an end, and though the past was painful, the future was bright for both of them. The story of Olivia, Ethan, and the wolf is one of deep bonds and survival. It highlights the incredible power of connection, whether between humans or animals. and how these connections can provide strength in the most dire circumstances. Despite the forces that tried to tear them apart, Ethan and his wolf were able to reunite and face the future together, proving that loyalty, love, and friendship are sometimes the most powerful forces for survival. Olivia's role in the journey is significant. She was not just a rescuer but also a catalyst for Ethan's recovery, helping both him and the wolf find their way back to each other. The story ultimately shows that even in the darkest of times, the right connections can lead to healing, and no one is truly alone as long as they have those who care for them.